Hey guys, how you going? My name is Dom, and in this video we're going to be creating this custom modal window using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Okay, so basically this will all be done using plain HTML, CSS and JavaScript. There is no need for any sort of external library such as jQuery. Alright, so you can see here that I have opened this window using a function called modal window.open modal. So we're going to also create this sort of like mini JavaScript API to actually use an open modal. So we can see here I've used open modal and I've passed in a few options. So I'll just close this one and open a new modal window and change the content to say, something else. Okay, and hit enter, and we can see that the new window opens up. So this will be how to actually use the modal window once all the code has been completed. Okay, so let's go inside this plain HTML file up here and take a look at the directory structure for this project. Alright, so inside the text editor we have this right here. So we have the index.html file, and then we have a CSS directory with a modal.css inside of that, and that is currently empty. The same goes for the JavaScript. We have a JS folder with modal window.js inside here, also empty. Okay, so and of course inside the index.html file I've included both the modal CSS file and the modal window JavaScript file. Now we are actually using one library. This will just be for the actual close X icon. So we're using Google's material icons to include that icon for closing the modal window. Alright, so anyway, this will be done in 3 parts: the HTML part, the CSS and the JavaScript. Okay, so let's go ahead now and create the HTML structure for a modal window. Okay, so back inside the example we have a few things here. So we have the black opaque overlay for the whole browser window. We have of course the modal window itself. We have the title bar and the content. So we have those 4 main segments as part of the HTML structure. Alright, so back inside the plain file, let's go ahead now and create this structure inside the body. Alright, so we're going to write out this structure here, and then later on, once it's all done, we're going to move it into the JavaScript. But for now, let's put all of the markup inside the body. Let's begin with the modal overlay. So I'm going to make a new div here and call this modal overlay, or have a class of modal __ overlay. So I'm just using the BEM naming convention here for a bit of clarity. Alright, so we have the overlay. So this will be of course the dark opaque overlay for the modal window. Alright, inside here we'll have the modal window, so the actual window itself. Okay, we then have the title bar. Alright, sorry, title bar. Inside the title bar we have the title, and we have the close button. Make a new span, call this modal title, and have a sample title inside there for now. For the close button, we can make a new button, give it a class of modal __ close, and a material icons class, and pass close into there. So having material icons and close inside the actual text will create the X close icon using the Google Material Icons library. Alright. We also have the modal content, so we can make a new div down here, call this modal content, and inside here we can have some dummy text. Alright, cool. So now we have the entire HTML structure for the modal window created. So I can just save this and refresh, and we are now working with this right here. So let's convert this into the nicely styled modal window. Alright, so let's go inside the modal CSS file and begin with the modal overlay. Alright, so we can begin by setting the positioning of the overlay. So we can say modal __ overlay, or target that class. Give it a position of fixed, This means it'll be on top of everything else on the HTML page. A width of 100% of the viewport width, so basically the entire width of the page. And the height for the same thing, so 100% of the viewport height. So VH just means 100% of the browser visible area. Alright? And we can give it a top of 0 and a left of 0. This means it's going to begin in the top left corner of your HTML, or sorry, the top left corner of your browser window. Alright? Let's give it a background of RGBA. So we can say 0, 0, 0, so black, and then say 0.5 for a 50% opacity. Okay, I can just save this and refresh, and we now have this right here. Alright, now we're going to want to display this as a flexbox. That way we can easily center the modal window horizontally and vertically. So I can say display and make this as a flexbox. Okay, I can now say align items center and justify content as being center also. So these two properties are going to center the modal window horizontally and vertically. Okay, so I can save this and refresh, and we have this right here. Okay, cool. So now for the modal window CSS. Back inside here, let's target the modal window class. We can give this a max width of 500 pixels and a background of white, a border of 1 pixel solid and then also white, a font size of 16px. So this will be the default in most web browsers, but just for a bit of assurance, or to make it a bit more solid, we're going to give it a font size. Give it a box shadow also of 0, 0, 15px and a bit of an opaque black. Alright, cool. So now I can save this and refresh, and we get this result right here. So we are getting there. Now the reason why I chose to use a max width of 500 pixels is because if I was to minimize this or make it smaller, we can see the content remains inside the browser window. So on mobile devices, your window will still work. Alright, cool. So now we can start to style the title bar. So we can target the modal title bar class. Alright, give it a height of 40px, a background of a nice dark grey, a display once again of flex so we can easily position the items inside of it, and align items of center. This means the items will be vertically centered, and justify content as being spaced between. So what this will do is make sure that the modal title and the close button are going to be spaced between each other, so on both or opposite sides of the title bar. So I can save this and refresh, and we get this here. So as we know, the justify content space between puts this over here and this over here. Okay, cool. So we can go back inside here and add some styles to the title bar. Sorry, to the title. So we target the modal title class, and we can say a margin left of 15px, a font weight of bold, and a color of a light grey. Okay, save and refresh, and we get this here. Cool. Now for the close button, so modal close, give it a width and height of the same amount as the title bar. Alrighty, an outline of none, a border of none. I want to give it a transparent background just to hide the default grey color of a button. Give it a color of, once again, the same light grey that's used in the title, and a cursor of pointer so the user knows they're pressing on a button. I can save this and refresh, and we get this result right here. And in case you didn't notice already, we can see that the Google icon for the close button has rendered. Alright, cool. So now when the user clicks on the close button, we'll give some feedback. So we'll make the X be a bit smaller on click. So back inside here, let's target the active pseudo class of the close button. So you can say modal close and say active. So when it gets pressed on, we're going to transform it and make it 90% of its original scale. Save this, refresh, click on it, and we can see it gets a bit smaller. Alright, cool. So now for the content. This will be pretty straightforward. You can just give it a padding of 15px. Now I'm using the same value here as the margin left of the title. Okay, and also let's give it a font size of 0.9 em. So this means basically it's going to be 90% of the 16px we defined up here. I can save this and refresh, and we get our final result. Perfect. Okay, so now let's go inside the JavaScript and add some methods and APIs to actually use the modal window. Okay, so for the JavaScript, let's go back inside this demo real quick and just see that we have here, we have the modal window global object, and we also have the open modal method. So the reason for having this sort of structure or setup is because we want to be able to create modal windows on the fly, and basically this means we have our own little library or API to create modal windows. So you can go ahead and make your own website and then simply call modal window.openModal whenever you want to make a new modal window. So that's the purpose of having this entire modal window object dedicated to opening modal windows. Okay, so let's go ahead now and create this whole structure or setup inside the JavaScript. Okay, so back inside here, let's go inside the text editor actually and open up this modal window JavaScript file, and let's define that object. So we can say const modal window is equal to an object. Okay, so this will contain a few methods, so not only the open modal method but also a few more. The first one's going to be init. Okay, so this will basically initialize the entire process of creating modal windows. For now, let's leave it blank. Okay, but when the page actually loads up, we're going to want to call the init function or method. Okay, so down here, let's say document.addEventListener. We're going to listen for the DOM content loaded events. Okay, and once that's done, we are going to call modalWindow.init. So basically, this just means once the document structure has been loaded by the web browser, we can now call the init function or method on the modal window object. Okay. So let's now create the second method. This will be called getHTMLTemplate. So this will actually generate the HTML for a new modal window. So we can call this one getHTMLTemplate, and this will take in a single argument, and this will be modal options. Okay, so this will be an object containing title and content. So basically it's going to be this object right here. Alright, so back inside here, this will return HTML for the structure, basically this HTML right here. So I'm going to copy this and get rid of it from the HTML file and paste it inside here. So I can say return. I'm going to use backticks here, okay, and pass in or insert the HTML right there. So with this, I'm using the backticks for ECMAScript 2015 template string. So this just means you're able to use multi-line strings in JavaScript and also pass in some variable content. So we need both those things to use this function, or make this function properly. So inside the modal title tag or class, we can just get rid of this and replace it with variable content. So I can say $, opening and closing brackets, and pass in here modal options.title. So as I said, this backtick here, or using these backticks allows us to use these features such as the variable content and also the multi-line string. For the content, we can do the same thing. So we can say open a new variable content section. We can say modal options dot content. So we expect the user of this modal window object, so the developer such as yourself, we expect you to pass in title and content to this method right here. Alright, so we have this. This generates HTML. We can then create the open modal method, which will then call this to get the HTML. So we can go down here and say open modal. This will also take in modal options. It'll default to an empty object. Okay. So here we want to actually define some defaults for the title and content. Okay, so we can do this using object.assign. So we can say modal options equal to object.assign, and we can pass our defaults as the first argument to the assign method. So we can say title as being modal title and content as being modal content. Alright, so these are our defaults for the title and content. We can then pass modal options into here as the second argument, and this basically means if the argument that you pass in, so if the modal options argument here, or parameter, contains title, then it's going to replace the default title. And the same goes for the content. So basically, if you don't give title or content or whatever into this parameter, then it's going to be replaced, or it's going to use the default instead. And that way, we're going to pass this into this method, and this will always give a title, or it'll always have access to a title and a content. Okay, so down here we're going to make a new constant, and this will be the return value of this method up here. So we can say const modal template is equal to this.getHTML template, and we can pass in here modal options, and then we can simply append this HTML to the document body. So we can say document.body.insert adjacent HTML. We can say here after begin, and we can simply say modal template. Alright, so here we're basically inserting this HTML after the opening body tag of the document. Okay, so let's just save this and refresh the browser, and then we can test this. So we can say modal window dot open modal, and now I'm going to pass in nothing. Okay, press enter, and we get here the default values for the modal window. I can go ahead and actually give it some values, such as title, we can say decode, and content, we can say something else, and of course it's going to work. So we press enter and we get this right here. So we have the basics of opening a modal window up and running. Okay, so inside here we can now make this close button work. So right now it doesn't work. Let's make that work by going inside the init function, okay, and adding an event listener to the document body. So we're going to say document.body.add event listener. We're going to listen for the click event, okay, and here we're going to keep hold of the event object, and basically we're going to check if the element you clicked on was the modal close button, then we're going to close the modal. So we can say if e.target.classList.contains modal close, then we're going to close the modal. But real quick, this e.target represents the element you actually clicked on, and then classList.contains just checks if the class list here contains modal close, then we know we've actually clicked on the close modal button. So we can say this.closeModal and pass in e.target. So now let's create this function inside here. So we can say close modal, and this will take in the close button element. So we can see here I've passed in e.target, which basically just means I've passed in all of this right here, so the actual element. Okay, so now basically we're going to use the close button element to close the modal window that the button is inside of. Okay, so let's actually get the whole modal overlay, okay, from the button. So down here we can say const modal overlay is equal to close button dot parent element dot parent element dot parent element. So it's not the cleanest way, but we can see here we're basically saying get the parent of the close button. So first we're going to get the title bar, okay, and then we're going to say get the parent of that, so it'll be the modal window, and then get the parent of that, which will be the modal overlay. Okay, so now we have hold of the modal overlay. We can then simply remove it from the HTML or the document structure. So we can say modal overlay dot parent element dot remove child and pass in modal overlay. So the parent of the modal overlay is going to be document.body. So what you can do instead is, maybe it's better actually to say document.body.remove child and pass in here modal overlay. Okay, so we're removing the HTML for the modal from the document body. So I can now save this and refresh, and we should have a fully working modal window. So I can go inside here and once again pass in some content, press enter, we get the modal window. I can now close it using the close button, and it works all well and good. Alright, and that right there is how you can create your own custom modal window using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.